Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'll just wait a few moments for everyone to join the room, but thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you're having a great conference so far. I'll mention this in housekeeping as well, but do please say hi in the chat. And as we go through the talk as well, please put any questions or comments or any other remarks you'd like to in the Pathable chat. We'd love to hear them. I know that myself and the rest of the panel want this to be as informal and interactive a conversation as possible. Oh, thank you to see that already. Everyone's saying hi. And you clearly know some of us as well, which is great. So I think I will kick off. So thank you very much for joining us today. Myself and the rest of the panel are going to talk to you a little bit about embedding the library in the patron's workflow with case studies from two universities, from Harvard University and the University of North Alabama. And of course, that's who you most want to hear from as well. So my name is Matt Hayes. I'm Managing Director of Lean Library. And I'm delighted to be joined by Coolidge Toker, Learning Technology Specialist from Harvard, as well as Derek Malone, University Librarian from University of North Alabama, Becky Cottrill, VP of SaaS Product Management from EBSCO, and Yisrael Kuchar, Senior Director of Product Management at Libris. So we want to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So I will begin with a very brief introduction. I particularly would just like to share some findings of a white paper that Lean Library has published off the back of a survey which directly relates to the concepts you're going to hear about today. And then Emily will take over and give you a little bit of a case study from Harvard, followed by Yisrael just explaining a little bit about how Libris has worked with Lean Library to enable that. And that will be followed by Derek giving the case study from University of North Alabama, and then Becky again giving a little bit of context on the ways in which EBSCO has helped enable that. And then if you continue to put questions and comments through the chat throughout, at the end, I will put those to my fellow panelists. So first off, just in terms of housekeeping, if you could put your questions and comments in the Pathable app or conference platform if you're on your desktop, that would be great. And we'll make sure to monitor those throughout. And don't restrict yourselves to questions. Comments would be just as great, just to hear your perspectives. We've also put a couple of polls in the presentation, which you can find on Pathable, and we'd love your feedback on those. You should be able to vote for your preferred options. That would be great to see as well. So I promised to speak a little bit about this white paper that Lean Library published yesterday, which I hope provides some interesting context for the rest of our talk. It's called Librarian Futures. You can download that link there, and I'll put that link in the chat as well. The focus of the report was really the idea of how do we get the library in the life of the user. And we partly use this to inform a new direction for Lean Library, but also we wanted to understand this concept more generally. And we think there's quite a lot of useful data for everyone, really. And it's not specifically focused on any particular aspect of it. It's a survey of 4,000 librarians and patrons across 1,500 institutions. We also interviewed many librarians and other stakeholders in the sector, brought in some unique data sets from partners like SpringShare and Site, as well as OCLC. And then we've also revealed a little bit of the data that we have at Lean Library on user workflows, in addition to some undergraduate studies, which give you the student perspective on how they would like their library to support them. The first finding that I think would be relevant to today, which I'm sure will be no surprise to any of you, is where patrons begin discovery. As can be seen here, the vast majority of discovery at the moment begins outside the library. And within that, most of that discovery begins on Google or Google Scholar. This was particularly pronounced when we looked at our Lean Library data, which you can imagine given these are primarily digital natives. And there, as many as 50% of the discovery journeys that we can see through Lean Library begin on Google Scholar. However, when we asked patrons whether they would adopt a digital application of their library and would like to have their library more closely embedded in their preferred workflows. A very significant majority of patrons, 88%, said that they would, as well as a majority of librarians. So I think our overall findings were really positive on the idea that patrons actually want their library more deeply embedded in their workflow. They don't want to just be left alone on sites like Google and Google Scholar. So that leads me really to the first poll, which is to ask what initiatives you are currently implementing at your library to put your library in the patron workflow. Hopefully you'll see that poll live now, and we'd love to get your thoughts on that, and I'll share them at the end of the talk. Then the final finding that I wanted to share was this very particular one. So in addition to general concepts of embedding the library in the workflow, we specifically asked patrons if they would like to see their library's discovery service embedded alongside open search tools. And as you can see here, 93% of faculty and 89% of students said they would find that desirable or very desirable. And I think that particular anonymous comment about the idea of being able to see Google alongside library discovery is really relevant here. You don't have to choose one over the other. Actually, multiple searches can be really effective in patron discovery. So with that in mind, I just want to finally tell you a little bit about what you're going to see in some of the case studies from Derek and Emily. What you'll be seeing is enabled by something that we have called at Lean Library Futures. And this is a new service from Lean Library that effectively brings all of the library into user workflows through our browser extension. Its focus is to streamline access to content, but also to enhance discoverability of the library and its services and resources, thereby growing usage and increasing visibility and impact. And our ambition with this is to help libraries be embedded in the life of the user in their preferred workflows. So moving from being simply a destination the user has to come to, whether that's the physical building or the digital platforms, into a new generation for the library, where the library can be embedded alongside their users' workflow. So with that being said, I'd like to hand over to Emily now, who's going to give you a case study from Harvard.
Hi, everyone. Those numbers that Matt just told us from the white paper are really heartening. We've been working on the development partnership for the last 5 or 6 months now, and are just starting to go live. So we've been doing most of what you'll see is happening in a test environment. And I'm just really excited to introduce this to our faculty and students really soon. So the motivation for participating in the development partnership, we had pre-pandemic as well, a lot of researchers joining us remotely, but the pandemic completely exacerbated that, the whole decentralization of campus. Where were our users? What resources did they have? That was no longer something that we could have much an idea about, really. We had to be really, really flexible in terms of what we can provide our users and figure out what would be foundational or core to what they need and get as much of that to them as possible. It also gave us the opportunity to make a meaningful distinction for patrons navigating a complex environment. And by this, I mean that the Harvard University system is huge. It involves a number of different schools, centers, programs, all of which have different kinds of access. And that's something that we're able to reflect in the way that the Lean Library extension is going to be working for us. To those very same ends, we present a more unified front. So we're able to say Harvard Library, even though we're speaking to so many different populations, and we're able to provide more customized access, especially in our professional schools, where they have some subscriptions and some library materials that aren't necessarily available across the board to all members of the Harvard community. We also had a desire to surface some underutilized resources in highly specific online contexts. Here we're seeing an example would be folks who are interested in digital scholarship, for instance, and we've got this JSTOR subscription to their text mining services that most of our patrons don't know about. So enabling easier access to things like that is something that we have been using Lean Library for. We also saw potential for community building, where if we're meeting our patrons where they are, they'll see themselves as members of a Harvard community. They'll see that the library is, in fact, working for them wherever they are. And we're hoping that that will lead to an increased sense of welcome and accessibility in the library as well. Go ahead, next slide, Matt. All right, so poll number 2, has the pandemic increased support for time or resources spent by your library in its digital footprint? My answer is yes. Big fat yes from Harvard. I assume, Matt, we're gonna do that again as well at the end, go through.
Absolutely, yes.
Great. All right, so here is a demo of some of the stuff that we have been working on for the Lean Library Futures. So if you can go ahead and press play, Matt. We're going to start with the Google Scholar search, which shows you the workflow librarian slide out. We've got library discovery here, so right there, which will probably end up being something like Hollis search results, we think, for accessibility reasons and consistency. But it takes you to a Hollis record. So this is the item in our library catalog. And here online access is key, so that's really helpful. But if there wasn't, you could also be directed towards pickup. Chat with a librarian is something that we already have enabled in our library.harvard environment and in the Hollis environment, but now it's also accessible in Wikipedia, Google Scholar, and Google, which is really exciting. In Wikipedia here, you can see one of our customized data packages for Curiosity, which is our digital collections. And here we've created some text to give you a little bit more background about what it is you're looking at here, and especially its relationship to the library. We spoke with folks who contributed to this project, what they would want surfaced there for people. And that's what you just saw, right? So the workflow librarian can be customized for a particular environment. And here we were looking specifically at the form for requesting special collections material, teaching with special collections, and the III manifest. All right. Thanks, Matt. So we've done all of this exciting development work, and we are now going to be rolling that out. We've started our soft launch just a couple weeks ago, and my next steps are going to be to facilitate increased librarian involvement in creating and deploying content. So I mentioned earlier that Harvard is a pretty complex environment, which means that I've been working with a stakeholder group of 35 people from across the university and making sure that what we're doing there doesn't negatively impact their workflows, and also calling on them to identify for us either underutilized resources that I mentioned before, and also anything that we want to make sure patrons know, that any kind of transparency issue that they've noticed that we could improve through Lean Library. And then doing some patron outreach about how much this has changed, and yes, please download it. And then we've got a year for user testing and feedback from both librarians and patrons to see how people like it. And I will hand it off to Yisrael. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. So a few words a bit about how we see discovery and discovery going forwards in general. But really at a time where the amounts of data, the amounts of different types and growing different types of different materials, again, whether purchased, subscribed, curated by the library or by other faculties in the institution, again, and from the user perspective, huge increase of impact and what a user expects from a system, coming from social media, from consumer platforms. So all this means that we need to adjust, and we need to keep adjusting. We need to adjust how we find the user and what we actually serve to the user. You have to have a user experience, again, which, again, I'm not saying UX, not just for the buzzword, but really the experience that the users expect, that will make them understand what they're finding, how they're to search for things, and obviously look relevant. Convenience in both finding materials and also once you find materials, how you get to the materials, whether physical, what you have to do, whether an electronic link or digital link, how many steps and hops and how confusing it is to get to. We all know the world we came from. And context both within the system, within the discovery system, as well as what Emily showed, coming from outside of the system. Users, as Matt and Emily said, often come from somewhere completely else, and that is part of the context we want to catch as well. Previously, we focused on pushing our materials, the library materials, out to Google crawlers. Words like sitemaps and schema.org, link data, dynamic rendering, all of these things were means to publish or to try and expose these materials, these library treasures to Google. And I think there's great room for that as well. But what Matt showed and Emily demoed a bit is looking at it from the other direction, is actually the user is currently outside. Let's see how we engage him and bring him inside. So again, we can have our materials out there. That's one option, but really this unique option of capturing his attention wherever he is and bringing him back into to the system. But why is this good? I mean, it's good. It's great for many reasons. I think one very important one is our own perspective, not before the patron, is brand recognition. I mean, a lot of the things, if a user today goes to Google Scholar and they find full text, and it's a full text they're actually getting because you subscribe, they don't even know about this often, and really bringing them back into the library, similar to what Emily talked a bit about the community perspective, is really bringing them and making them part of the library. That's definitely one perspective. Matt, if you go to the next slide, other elements of why we want to bring them in is because we can offer them a lot of services which they would not necessarily find in Google, whether it's in the unique materials that Emily showed before. Here's examples of special collections. These are what we call curated collections, curated by the library, but it could also be special subscriptions. But really, things that, again, they probably will not find or will only find kind of a hint of out there, and we need to bring them back in, and then we can offer them a lot more than actually kind of they saw on the surface of it through Google. Next slide. Other elements that we can bring, which again come under these services, once we've managed to bring that user back into the library, we can then offer them a lot more of different things, again, beyond the different materials that we said, but similar to what users are used to and expect from again, from what they find out there, the consumer apps and other social media, is once they start searching for something or find something or searched in Google and were pulled back in, we now understand something about what they're looking for and can offer them different types of materials based on different types of relationships. Again, formal or informal relationships, materials cited in this article or cited by this article. And again, a lot of different types of relationships, which really will allow the user to continue his research and find things that they couldn't find with that initial search that they've done wherever they were outside of the system. And really, this work that we looked at before of Lean Library, again, based on existing APIs, we can capture that user wherever he is and bring him back in and then offer him this whole package as kind of continuation of his path as well. With that, I think I'm handing off to Derek.
Hi, can everybody hear me in here? Good. Okay, well, my name is Derek Malone. I am the University Librarian at the University of North Alabama, and I want to share a little bit about our experience with Lean Library. Matt, next slide, please. In November of 2019, we adopted a new strategic plan. I do want to stress that that was in November of 2019. So while surely some of this is pandemic induced for us too, we were kind of forecasting out a need for something like Lean Library then in 2019. So any back to normal would go back to still using this. We have 3 or 7 priorities within our strategic plan. 3 of those priorities align well with Lean Library, and those are on the screen right now. The way that we manage goals and priorities within our organization is to take priorities and then have one goal that we can work toward in groups, in teams throughout the year. And last year for 2020, 2021, for priority 3, develop strong technological integration, we focused on Lean Library. Next slide, please. So I realize that's a screenshot of Google Scholar, but I want to tell a little bit of the story of why that's up there first. We are the largest or the fastest growing university in the state of Alabama, and we have tremendous online growth. Also, along with that online growth is the MBA program. So we have the largest MBA program in the state of Alabama, and it has grown 27% in the last 2 years, up to over 1,000 students. The reason I am showing Google Scholar right now is because the College of Business Technology likes to push Google Scholar as the platform to use for research, the first platform to use with no other background given other than to go to Google Scholar and search there. But that's a tremendous online crowd that is searching through Google Scholar without any other prompt that is mainly off campus. And there were issues after issues after issues of folks that were going there to search and being hit with paywalls, giving up, purchasing, or doing something else entirely, possibly illegal, I guess. So this was a focus for us. We did not have a liaison program years ago at UNA. We do now. And I've taken the College of Business and Technology as the liaison responsibility specific to me. So I kind of had a target to help them with some of this Google Scholar usage. I want to point out 2 things that the browser extension is doing that's on the screen right now. If you notice, you can see our holdings in the middle there, right next to those articles. So if somebody was off campus, they typically would not see that UNA affiliation unless they set it up in Google Scholar themselves. But this goes around that with the browser extension being set up for them already. There's also an assist message in the top right-hand corner that prompts them to schedule a research consultation if they're having difficulties. So while there might not be a prompt from a faculty member to seek out that research consultation or to have any Google Scholar techniques or different search strategies, we are assisting them there with that message, kind of nudging them to do so. Next slide, please. So in our working group, the team that worked toward our goal last year, assist messages were a big focus beyond the initial setup of just correlating with our resources. And these are a couple more assist messages, but they have high specificity for why we're using them. The bottom left-hand corner is our local newspaper. Our local newspaper is behind a tremendous paywall. You cannot read anything but the first couple lines of every article. However, we have full image access to it in a database called Access World News. That would likely go unknown to the common user. However, we have an assist message that redirects them to Access World News, where all they have to do is click on the Times Daily icon when they get there. That's the same with Sports Illustrated and other popular magazines in Flipster. So we have a Flipster subscription. We have quite a bit of content in Flipster. We push most of our popular magazines there. So if you have this widget or this extension with us and it's set up to UNA, you would get messages prompting you with Sports Illustrated or Rolling Stone or other popular content that we have in Flipster to redirect there to see the full text. Next slide, please. So this is a walkthrough of some of the UNA experience and Lean Library, and I'm going to narrate as best I can here. So automatically the assist message popped up there. That assist message shuttles out to our reservation page to reserve a consultation with the librarian. You see in the middle that everything is prompted with access for UNA. And then also layered on top of that, we are EDS subscribers. So that can, I think it's going to be searched again here. With that EDS layer, the user is able to shuttle out directly to EDS from there, from that search that was conducted in Google Scholar. We can go next slide. That's a duplicate. That shouldn't be in there. Just go ahead, next slide. Okay, so a couple things looking forward at UNA and a couple notes from what we've done. Setting it up did take a good amount of time. The team was really helpful in that, and that we identified what we wanted to do. Once we got a rhythm of the assist messages, it's very easy. You just kind of have to get familiar with it, what you want to target. We have taken assist messages off too. We had an assist message on Amazon, just in general Amazon. And I think that made our librarians more mad than anybody else, but we took that off because they were getting aggravated by their Amazon constantly nudging them to go to our library when they wanted to buy something else. Our systems librarian was extremely helpful in setting up that part of the things. We don't have LibChat set up yet, and that's because we're without a system specialist right now. It's not that it's necessarily difficult. It would just be the work of that person to do. So a lot of that was quickly done by him, but he left. So the rest of the stuff we were able to manage on our own. Instruction for us played a big role in this. FYE in English 111, which is our first of the first year writing classes, happened in fall. And those aren't necessarily research driven. They could be integrated into this. We have a module on FYE, for example, we could integrate into there. But the real heart of the instruction and research will take place in spring. So that's where we really have an instruction push toward Lean Library. We advertise this quite a bit now, not so much last year, but this year we've started advertising on screens. We have walkthroughs too that we play on our screens. We advertise, we have a heavy restroom signage initiative. We have restroom signs up with Lean Library. So we're really pushing usage and adoption of the browser extension. And then I think moving forward, we're going to look at more numbers. So far, it's been pushing this out, learning about it, but now we're going to start having numbers that we work toward and goals that we work toward moving forward in adoption and how many users we have and different clicks on different things. I will say back to that Times Daily, our local newspaper, that is our #1 clicked assist message in the entire browser extension. So we know something's working there, and we'll start to look at more numbers along those lines. Next slide.
Thanks, Derek. That was excellent. EBSCO, in supporting University of North Alabama with their Lean Library Future integration, really aims to transform lives by providing relevant information when, where, and how people need it. And I think you've seen a common theme here in all the discussions that we focused on today. It's really the where and the how that we're focused on here. I think we've all either experienced directly or heard our students and our patrons and our researchers come to us and say, I'm stuck. I'm trying to get to this particular article, or I'm trying to find this particular area of content, or I'm searching in this particular area of research. And I've clicked on 14 different things and I still can't get to any article, any valid, meaningful, current information to support my research. What do I do? The many-click nightmare. So here we've shown the user has gone through a number of steps here. They've had to reach out to the librarian. What's our login? What are my credentials? What do I enter here? They've already gone through 8 clicks here, Matt. And if you go to the next slide, they still haven't gotten to the full text of the article they're trying to gather for their research. Finally, by click 12, almost 4 minutes later, they've gotten one article that they can then gather together for their research. This is what it means to be given the direction, go search in Google Scholar, like you said earlier today, Derek, go search in Google Scholar with no additional guidance provided. This is the result of that type of environment. And so if you go to the next slide, what does it mean when you introduce the Lean Library Futures integration? Here's how users find resources with Lean Library and EBSCO while still starting their discovery process in Google Scholar. They get seamless, authenticated access through library preferred routes to the discovery service that you and your institution has invested in. So they start their research in Google Scholar. They get their library preferred link. And if you go to the next slide, you can see they've downloaded their PDF in 4 clicks, less than a minute. They feel confident, they feel successful, they've been able to get to some meaningful research, and they don't feel completely overwhelmed. And they've taken advantage of the discovery service that your institution has invested in, and they've taken advantage of the academic content that you have correlated for their use. So if you go to the next slide, Matt, what does that mean? Well, you saw in the example that Derek showed, when the Lean Library Futures app pops up and it provides the top 10 search results, that is direct access to the content that your institution subscribes to. EDS has breadth and depth of content in your curated academic resources that you want to expose and that you know your users need. This pops up automatically for them in an environment that they're accustomed to, that typically they wouldn't find that content. And if you go to the next slide, finally, again, it enables users access to not only the breadth and depth of that content, but also to the power of the search engine that you've paid for through leveraging that discovery service. They can choose to stay within the Google Scholar environment and the search results that are displayed in the Lean Library Futures app, or they can be driven directly to that discovery service environment and take advantage of additional search and content functionality that's available to them through that direct route that you have now provided to them, where they want it and how they want to get access to it. So I want to say thank you to all my co-presenters today. The demos were great. Thank you to Matt and the folks at Lean Library. We've thoroughly enjoyed working with you on this integration, and we look forward to hearing questions from all of you that participated in our session today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a bit. So we did super well, by the way, to leave 10 minutes for questions because there was so much to get through. So well done to all the rest of the panel. It was amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, as well, for doing the polls. I probably won't have time to bring in the word cloud, but if you do have a chance to look at it, please do, because it's really fun. So just to pick some examples, people mentioned plugins, including ourselves, but also Lipki Nomad, mentioned learning management system integrations, Coursera integrations, the idea of the embedded librarian, and I'm trying to read more of them. But anyway, lots of examples of where libraries are already putting themselves in their patrons' workflow. And then the second poll, where we asked whether time or resource had increased to focus on the digital experience as a result of the pandemic. 32% of you said yes, significantly. 44% said yes, a little. 20% said no, no change. And 4% said it's actually reduced. And in fact, one of you kindly commented in the chat that you'd found budget constraints as a result of the pandemic. So lots of different perspectives there. And then we have 4 questions. So I'll try my best to get through them all, that are particularly good to put publicly. Others I addressed in the chat. One of them, I hope you don't mind, Emily, I think this would be a good one to put to you because you've used Lean Library the longest. And the question is, can you talk about the marketing or outreach strategies that you have done or have planned to make patrons aware of Lean Library? And how do you track your KPIs, like active user targets?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the last part is the easiest. The dashboard has a good tally of our active users, and I keep an eye on that. In terms of outreach, we have a network of liaison librarians who have either department affiliations, center affiliations, and sometimes program affiliations, and they do some outreach directly to incoming students and new faculty. We also have a tool page on our library website. So it's generally something, I'm also a reference librarian. I do chat reference. And when folks come to me and they've been running into paywalls, I make sure that they have downloaded Lean Library as well. So we'll find the article and be like, but you will also find this as a very helpful tool. So it's that sort of thing, yeah.
Thanks so much, Emily. And then Derek, a question for you, if you don't mind. In fact, it was put directly to you. In investigating this type of product, what stood out between Lean Library's product versus others like Third Iron's Lipki Nomad or EndNote Click?
We do also use Lipki Nomad, and I think that often there are comparisons drawn between the two. When you really get to using them, though, they are quite different. They have their own uses. I'm a Lipki Nomad fan. I would not say one ill word toward it, but this is a different product. The assist messages in particular and other integrations that we're able to do here, we're not able to do. There's no customization in Lipki Nomad, things like that. So it was an enhancement. It was an enhancement in different areas, and they both work really well together, in my opinion.
Thanks so much, Tarek. And then a related question, not related question actually, but since you're speaking right now, this would be a good question to put to you too. And it's maybe it's too early to say, but did you see an increase in usage of the library collection and the number of appointments with the liaison librarian? Or is that what you're tracking? Is that something that you're looking to track?
We are not tracking that currently. We did have this pushed in 2 courses strategically last spring. We will do that again this upcoming spring. We'll start looking more at numbers and what we're getting from there now that we have a comparison to the past in Lean Library itself. We'll also start some workshopping, digital badging around Lean Library too. We haven't necessarily compared past to current in any instruction endeavor other than we tested it out and got some feedback on it.
Thanks so much, Tarek. Then Emily, a clarification question for you, I think, is you mentioned that the link from Google Scholar will be to Hollis because of accessibility issues.
No, it is currently to Hollis, but it doesn't say Hollis on it. So we are, in terms of keeping library branding consistent, which we've lumped under accessibility, we want to make sure that people always know that the same word means the same thing across all of our platforms and services.
And there's another question, which I kind of relates back to the first question, Emily, but I think it's been asked a few times, and I think it's an important one. How do you convince users to add the browser extension? We have struggled with that in the past. And I'm very happy to speak to that as well, but it'd be great to get.
I haven't had to do a lot of convincing. I usually run into people who've been having trouble finding the sources that they want. And as soon as they have installed it, they're finding a lot more of what they're looking for. So the convincing component hasn't been much of an issue. I think where we do run into a little bit more difficulty is for the folks who get tired of pop-ups very quickly. And every now and then we might have like a proxy issue where Lean Library makes will occasionally glitch. So we will have people who will uninstall it after a bad experience, and then the convincing comes into at that point. But that's very rare.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I would just add to that the Lean Library perspective, which is that we track active usage across the total enrollment at the university as a KPI for us, for our library partners, and it's 25% globally, and we'd like that to be, of course, higher. We actually really hope that Lean Library Futures will help with that, because there it would no longer be about downloading a browser extension for one thing, for simplifying access to PDFs. It will be about downloading a browser extension that gives you access to all of your library expertise, services, support, those integrations that you saw. But I can also say that where we have been successful in terms of driving uptake, it's where libraries do lots of point of need advertising. So, for example, links to download the browser extension on their learning management system or the discovery service, with the call to action that if you're finding it painful to get access, this is what you need. That tends to really drive uptake. And I fear that at 10 past 8, not 8 in my time, sorry, that's different, but we might be near the end. But yes, as Mara says, if we haven't got to all the questions, we can go back to Pathable and address them there. I just want to make sure I have plenty of time to thank my colleagues, fellow panelists. Thank you so much, Yisrael, Becky, Emily, and Derek. It's been a brilliant conversation. And thank you to everyone for participating in Pathable and for joining us this afternoon and this evening, wherever you are.